Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the newest episode of Mergedworlds, my Dungeons and Dragon story podcast series. This is episode 106. So if you're new here, there's been a lot of story up to this point, and I appreciate you giving me a chance to share it with you. This story, this Dungeons & Dragons campaign, I have been writing and running for more than 30 years, closer to 35 at this point, I want to say. And it is exciting and awesome to have the opportunity to get to share it with everyone out there. So every other week on Tuesdays, this video comes out on YouTube. It is also available as an audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and everywhere that you get your podcasts. So if you'd rather listen to it in audio form, if that's more convenience for you, definitely please consider checking it out over there as well. And if you enjoy it, be sure to click like, subscribe here to the channel so you can see more of my content. And if you're listening to this on one of the audio podcasts, be sure to rank it, like it, to give it the 5 stars, whatever it is over there. Whichever one you're at, I definitely appreciate your support very much. So last time we left off, we were telling the story. We were with the group that was Artis, Ran, Kip, Petal, and Maeve. They were traveling into new lands, continuing to head east on their continued search for Seraph and his friends, hoping to help catch up with him and help him in his quest to save Dina. They are unaware that he has already done so at this point and of any of the issues that he has been involved with since. They've lost his trail. They've not found any signs in quite a while, but Quintius, the magical holy artifact, the scepter that Artis has been leading in this direction, given basically signs and information from the gods themselves, though nothing specific, only generic stuff, like you must continue east where you are needed. Traveling, they entered into a new land that they found was very disrupted, I should say, and a land where the gods, as Artis and everyone knows them, are viewed as old gods who abandoned them on this section of the world over 100 years ago. And that is now in the tight grip of the Children of the Night, which is a new god, a new religion that has popped up in the area. Of course, with Artis being a cleric of truth, Maeve being a paladin of the same god, Zorn, god of truth, they feel that drawing of, okay, well, we need to go over here and see what's going on, because we know, in fact, that the gods are real and true and have not abandoned us, because they give us powers and abilities all the time that we use to help people. We need to figure out what's about. So as they continued deeper into this land, one evening they were attacked by a very strong and powerful humanoid-like creature, which turned out to be a vampire. They were able to destroy the vampire, but putting this together, they believe that this could be a larger sign of the issues that they're heading into. And that is kind of where we left off. So we're going to continue on the story today. Today is going to be a lot of reading. I've pre-written a lot of this. This is the very first episode of Mergeworlds that's ever been pre-recorded. I find that the vast majority of people who intake Mergeworlds do so after the live stream. And being able to record it and release it bi-weekly, every other Tuesday, it gives me some options and abilities to bring some more effects to the video side of this, and hopefully be able to provide a bit more of a cohesive storyline for the audio podcast listeners as well. So if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, I'd love to hear your thoughts of the new format, with it being pre-recorded, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, if you even notice a difference. I would say on audio podcast side, probably you shouldn't notice much at all. But if you have questions or anything about the format or questions about Mergeworlds at all, please put those down in the comments here, and I will be very, very happy to address them, respond to you. Or you can go to my website, Onlydraven.com, and down at the bottom of the homepage is a place you can email me. If you have questions or like to know more information about Mergeworld, love to have you send that over. I promise I'll do my best to get back with you as quickly as I can. Okay, so we're going to jump into the story. Now, this part here is going to take place several days after the fight of the vampire. They've continued, the characters, Ran, Kip, Petal, Maeve, and Artis, to the east, deeper into this new country that we're looking at. We'll begin with some reading. The city guards were at a loss for words. They had never been in such a predicament and were unsure of what to do. The city of Haven's Crest was the largest and the central city of the nation of Sevalence. Thousands of people lived within its walls, and even more lived in the city outside of them. So again, there's a city, big wall around it, and then another larger city section outside of those walls. It's very clear that inside the walls was probably the original city, and over time, this is a very old city, has grown and expanded beyond those original walls. Let's see. The nation and city were ruled by the Senate, 13 men and women chosen by the noble families and guilds of the land. The Senate was advised and guided by the Lord of the Night, who was the leader and the head priest of the Church of the Night. The Lord, who split his time between Haven's Crest and the Knight's Keep, a fortress several days to the southeast, and which also served for a home for the church. So the Lord of the Night kind of goes back and forth. There's a keep that's to the southeast, which is on the edge of the ocean. We'll talk more about the keep later, but he kind of splits his time over that. That's the home of the church, of this religion, if you will. But there are what you call temples or churches throughout the land as well to this same religion. The Lord was at Knight's Keep currently, so message was sent to Father Minos, who oversaw the church and city while the Lord was away. Minos sent 2 priests to oversee the issue at the city's gates, believing it to be a minor issue. When the priests arrived, they found it to be anything but. Standing at the gate, awaiting permission to enter the city, was a group of exceptional people. The first and the main cause of trouble was Artis, a cleric of the god Zorn. Unlike the many charlatans and fake clerics that occasionally came to the city, the priests could tell immediately that Artis was a true cleric, and one of great significance. So, clerics, by and by, can sometimes sense the aura of other clerics. There's a lot of different creatures and things in D&D that have the same type of abilities, undead sensing undead, so on and so forth, and clerics sensing clerics kind of have that same feel. Okay, so if a cleric is near another cleric of the same god, they're more likely to sense that specifically. They're going to feel a kindred spirit. They're going to pull towards someone who's of the same faith. That's of the direct god's followers. So in this situation, Zorn, being what both Artis and Maeve serve, they all have a sense of each other, very much so, all the time, and would feel that way with other clerics or paladins or followers of Zorn that have the god's powers. I say this because a follower, someone who just worships the god, goes to church every whatever days, so on, isn't necessarily getting spells and abilities from their god to do things. They have no aura about them in this nature. Directly opposed clerics, so a cleric of light, cleric of darkness, would not sense each other as much because they're so diametrically opposed. It by naturally would reject each other. They may sense something is off in an area, and they may have a hard time depending who, but they might be able to narrow it down based on the way someone's acting and such. Now, much like with undead, priests' powers are going to also have an effect on this. A priest who is very powerful is going to have a larger aura, right? You're going to see that. This aura is way more powerful. This one is radiating with the divinity of the god that they worship. But, again, a very high-level cleric would also potentially have more abilities to mask or cloak that, to protect themselves in order to do their god's work, so on and so forth. They may not want to be seen by everybody walking around. Now, in the situation we're talking about here, whether the 2 priests that came from the Children of the Night are worshippers of a true god of any kind and have any powers, I'm not saying they do or they do not at this point, but they can see Artis, and just by the way she carries herself, again, she's a noble, she's a princess, she's going to be raised, she's going to have that just sense of here's someone of importance or authority just in the way that she carries herself. That's going to be noticeable by a lot of people, not just another cleric sensing power. I wanted to cover that. Even worse, so they sense her, and she's a cleric of great significance. Even worse, she was accompanied by a paladin of the same god, a minotaur to boot. The 2 women stood there confident and resolute, making no efforts to disguise their identities. So they're proudly walking up as clerics of truth. They're not trying to stay cloaked and hide the fact that they're a cleric. Not that Maeve could ever hide the fact that she's a Minotaur. And immediately, she does not see any other Minotaurs. And the way people are looking at her when she walks by, it's clear that Minotaurs are not a common sight in this area, if ever or at all. Okay. With them was a mage, who also wore the symbols of the god of magic. Because there's a god of magic, that's Delovian, and on the runes and stuff that would be on Petal's robes, there would be symbols as part of those robes of her worship of the god of magic. So that would be on there as well. At first they had thought her to be an elven child, but after a moment realized her small stature was that of a grown woman. While the priests had heard of Kender, they had never before seen one. So this is not an area where Kender are prevalent at all. But word has gotten around, as they would, Kender people warned about. Their last two companions appeared to be warriors of some kind. The priests had no doubt they would be quite effective with the weapons they confidently carried. That's going to be Ran and Kip. So unless Kip busts out a musical instrument and starts playing tunes, he may not always appear to be a bard. And he is a fighter in his own right as a rogue, and carries himself so. He's probably just as confident looking as Artis is, whether he is or not. That's just someone who, part of his personality. And so he very often he and Rand play the part of their guards, the protectors escorting them. He may not openly say, hey, I'm a bard, but that doesn't mean it won't come out over time. The senior of the two priests introduced themselves. Greetings, travelers, he said. I am Brother Bifton, and this is Brother Ellis. We welcome you to our fine city. Thank you, replied Artis, who was almost always the first one to speak. I must say this is an unusual introduction. Why is it we are being detained while all others are allowed entrance? And this is true. Well, the city guards are like, whoa, hold up, you're trying to come in here? They don't normally see clerics of this type. But regular folks are going into the city like it's no problem, but they've been asked to wait before entering the city. The two priests looked at each other quickly before Bifton continued. I apologize for the wait, but it was for your own protection. Are the streets of Haven's Crest unsafe? Asked Petal. Traditionally, no. The streets are safe and well patrolled by the city guards. This is Bifton speaking. I must be honest, though, and tell you that there are some citizens who would not be happy to see folks of your faith. There are many who still blame the abandonment of the old gods for their troubles, and for the Great Merging. So, the Great Merge, which you know is what created Mergeworlds, this guy's saying, hey, there's people out there, bad things have happened over a long time, they believe the gods have abandoned it, seeing clerics walking around claiming to be clerics of these gods may not be that welcome. Especially if the whole world being uprooted and changed and people may be losing the ability to ever contact friends and family who are outside of the range of their section of the Merge. They're blaming that on the gods as well. We are priests of the Church of the Night, Bifton continues. And as such, you can see... let me read that. We are priests of the Church of the Night, and as such, can see to your safety. Bifton motioned towards the group of 6 warriors who had accompanied them. These Templars of our order will see to it that you are unaccosted during your time here, and may serve as guides as well. So there's 6 Templars of the Church of the Night, also known as the Children of the Night. And they have tabards on showing the symbol of the house, the faith, so on and so forth. And these guys are going to go keep you safe while you're traveling around the city. If it pleases you, we would welcome you to join us at the temple, Bifton says. So right there they learn, okay, so this religion does have a temple within the city. This is the first real temple of the Children of the Night that they've come in contact with. Over their travel over the last few days since fighting the vampire, they have come across 1 or 2 small towns, villages, farmsteads, and while sometimes they were greeted pleasantly and some very stiffly, they never had any trouble, this is the first time they've seen of active, organized parts of this religion. We appreciate your offer, replied Maeve, but I don't feel we'll have any problems with your citizens. And we've been on the road many days. We prefer to find a place to stay and rest ourselves. So Maeve's like, yeah, we'd love to go with you to the temple, but we're not too worried about your citizens. And Maeve's saying that, standing 12 freaking feet tall, in plate mail, and a sword looking like a Final Fantasy Buster, so a huge 2-handed sword strapped on her back. is a very imposing figure. But, added Artis, we would be pleased to visit the temple later. We know very little of your faith and would like to learn more. So Maeve's like, hey, we're going to go do our own thing. Appreciate the offer and all, but we're going to go do our own thing. And Artis is like, but we'll come see you later. You're trying to keep that positive conversation going. The two priests bowed. Of course, we would be honored to share the word of the goddess with you, said Bifton. You will find many wonderful inns in our fair city. Our Templars will be available to you at all times. They will bring you to us when you are ready. So that's Bifton's way of saying, okay, that's fine. These 6 guys are still going to go with you, and if you need a guide or you're ready to come to us, you let them know they're going to bring you to us. But they're going to still travel with you to keep you safe. The most important thing that they got out of that little snippet of information, it says, the worship the goddess. So that means that the Lord of the Night, the guy head priest that everybody they've learned about, is not the top of the religion. Is not at least claiming to be a deity himself. He is still claiming to serve some other feminine deity of some kind. So this is the first, because that's one of the things they're going to want. How high does this church go? Who do you worship? What's your god's name? This is information they don't have at this point. But they don't want to be too blunt about it. So they're picking up little things as they're talking here. With another bow, Bifton motioned to the city guard, who moved to allow Artis and her friends to pass. Artis thanked them, and then she and her companions entered the city. Haven's crest was about the same size as Serenity, though the buildings were much older and closer packed together. It was clear that the buildings inside the walls were much older than without. Many of them seemed in ill repair. As they made their way down the busy street, most people moved far out of their way. Artis paid very close attention to the faces that she passed. It was midday, so she did not expect to see anything supernatural, but she watched anyways. So it's the middle of the day. They're keeping an eye out. Don't think they're going to see any vampires walking around the crowd in the middle of the day, which is clearly a concern that they have at this point. Where there's one, there could be more. Most of the faces she passed showed emotions of confusion, frustration, and some even of fear or hatred. Most importantly, though, here and there in the crowd, she could occasionally see the look of hope. Artis smiled, happy to see it, knowing that this was the first step to helping these people. They came upon an inn named the St. Vincent. Intrigued by the name, they made their way inside. The 6 Templars that had been openly but silently following them did not follow them inside, choosing to wait outside. So the Templars are giving them space. They're not like right up on them or circling them. They're maybe 10 feet behind, making no attempt to hide that they're there. They're quite open to the fact that we are following you in case there is a problem, under the assumption that if the characters get in trouble, the Templars will help protect them. You have to assume, of course, that Artis and them, like, how much of it is that and how much of it is them keeping an eye on us, right? Both of those things could be there. So the guards are going to wait outside the inn. Maybe even split up and watch a couple different entrances and exits, making sure nobody sneaks out the back, if you will. But they're not coming inside. Inside, they're letting them do their thing. The St. Vincent was a large and well-maintained establishment, almost bordering on luxurious. As was normal, the clientele inside fell mostly silent upon their entrance. They have that effect on people. Maeve being the main reason of that, but specifically in this area with the whole cleric thing, they walk in the room and most people get a little quiet and are wondering what's going on. A thin, well-dressed man came up and welcomed him. His name was Lanyon, and he was the owner of the inn. They were able to arrange 3 rooms for the next several days. The price was higher than they normally spent, but well within their means. Just remember that most of these guys come from wealthy families, right? At least Petal, Artis, and Maeve do. And Petal's pretty wealthy. Her family's pretty wealthy. But nothing compared to, especially Darsh. Darsh is the wealthiest. Even though you think, a lot of people might think that Maeve is, or I'm sorry, Artis's family is, Serenity itself, which is very simple, but Poor Mercy has a lot of expenditures. Maintaining a city, a kingdom, and the constant stuff they're dealing with, border wars with Oromon, dealing with stuff like that. They have a lot more land to protect, cities to oversee and such. Whereas Darsh has his 4 islands, which are pretty close together and They're locked, right? They're surrounded by water. So to get there, you got to come by ship. No army's just going to march up on them in the middle of the night. A little bit easier to defend that way. And his business is across the seas with multiple ships, dealing in trade as he does. He definitely makes more than he's putting out into upkeep at this point. And his fleet, which he straight up has a fleet at this point. The man has ships upon ships at all times. His flag is well known in every harbor. But these three brought a good chunk of money with them, as well as some gems and jewelry, things that might be needed for trade in areas where coin might not be accepted, right? They're traveling across the world, going into pieces of worlds unlike their own. They may find a place where money has no value, but a shiny gem or something of that nature, a gold necklace or something, might be easier to trade for things they need than straight up coins. And they were given a magical bag, for those who play D&D, called the Hayward's Handy Haversack, which is a bag of holding with several small little bags of holding on it. So they have a large amount of material and coin in in the backpack that Artis carries, even though it wouldn't look like they're carrying as much as they have. They still have quite a bit of wealth with them on this journey, occasionally picking up a coin here and there. So buying a fancy room is within their means very easy. They normally don't do that. But in this situation, they are doing it specifically, and we'll talk about why a little bit later. They were escorted upstairs to their rooms. Artis and Petal would share a room next to Maeve. So in one room, Artis and Petal are going to share a room. Next to them is a room for Maeve specifically. Because most beds aren't made for Minotaurs. She pretty much needs a full queen or king size bed just for herself, and even then she's not super comfortable. Ran and Kip shared a room across the hall. So they're not all in a row. It's two rooms and one across the hall. Storing their gear and belongings, they then waited for Petal to cast spells of protection on their rooms, something they didn't normally do. So the type of spell protection, the warding, if you would, are meant more to make it known to them that someone's in there. It's not going to cause harm to anyone who enters into their room, but it's kind of their way of putting a protection spell, making it harder for someone to come in the door. It's almost like a locking door spell, and then would make it aware if someone came through. By casting it on the room, it's going to cover both doors, windows, or any entrance in or out, which is great with a spell like that because it's an area of effect spell. So if you're casting it has a small area effect. It'll cover an average size room. But if there's a secret door that they're not aware of, it's going to cover that. Somebody enters in through a secret door. It's not that she's casting it on the door specifically. It's the room. So it's a higher level of just casting a spell on the door. And so she doesn't normally do this all the time they stay, but they are a little more nervous about here. Vampires climbing in through a window. They got to worry about stuff like that. So she cast those spells. All went well until the third spell was being cast in the men's room, where Ran and Kip were staying. Petal experienced a small wild magic surge. She was able to control it enough to finish the spell, though it also had the unplanned effect of causing several dozen butterflies to appear inside the room. Petal apologized, but with a laugh, Kip advised that he thought it was actually pretty delightful. When they returned to their rooms that night, they'd open the windows so the butterflies could escape. So, because they're not going to leave the windows open while they're gone, they negate having a whole protection spell. But a wild surge can happen anytime a wild mage casts a spell. The severity of that will cause the spell to alter its effect. Sometimes it'll add extra effects, like it did here, cause a bunch of butterflies to appear in the room. Sometimes it will change the spell completely to something much more devastating. Or sometimes it can increase or decrease the potency of the spell, which we saw much earlier in the story. If you remember, when Deacon was trying to cast a Burning Hands spell, and the Wild Magic Surge went through a big one, and just a huge gout of flame burned through the streets, wiping out tons of people, right? That was a huge spell, caused collapse of the building he was in and everything. The Wild Magic Surge was a huge one, and he wasn't able to control it. Surges can differ, not just only from person to person, which they can, depending on the power of the Wild Mage and how linked they are to Wild Magic. Because I think I've talked about this before, but I want to stress it. You can't just be a regular mage and decide, hey, I'm going to be a wild mage. It doesn't work that way. Wild magic is something you're born into, at least in the way that Mergedworlds uses wild magic. You're born with that link, and you have to learn to control it, because if you don't, even regular day-to-day activities could trigger a wild surge, and if you don't know how to control it or redirect it, it could have very dire effects and hurt a lot of people or kill yourself. So when someone is found to have wild magic, they may not become a mage, but they still will very often be trained at least how to control or block it or mitigate the effect of a wild magic surge, because they can be uncontrollable, but are more likely, when you're tapping into magic's nature itself, to cast a spell. Wild magic is a form of mage magic. Okay? There are no wild magic clerics at this point. Because again, clerics are given the spells from the gods specifically. Wild magic is a force in the world that is not controlled really by anything. Even the Delovian, the god of magic, who attempts to help restrain it, is not the source of wild magic. So, just a little history on, again, how wild magic works. Spellcast as well, butterflies everywhere. We haven't seen a lot of wild magic surges, but they do happen from time to time. Sometimes they're very minor enough not worth mentioning. But this one was pretty. All these different colored butterflies that shouldn't be together, full of the room. Everybody laughs, thinks it's cute. She ensures, yes, the spell still worked, though. And they're like, well, when we get back tonight, we'll open up the window and let the butterflies get out for a little while. After a short rest, they gathered and made their way out of the inn. They began making their way down the streets towards the marketplace, their 6 silent Templar friends close behind. A city's marketplace was one of the best places to see what a city is truly like. The goods people buy and sell, the prices, the types of people who make up the vendors, the condition of the streets and stalls, as well as how well it is guarded and patrolled, and by whom, all serve to give you a sense of the type of city that you're in. Except for an inn or tavern, a marketplace was also one of the best places to get information or gossip. So going to a marketplace is a great way to say, hey, what is this town really like? You go to the marketplace, I see, okay, there's some dwarves with a stall, there's some elves with a stall, you know what I mean? This lets me know that other races are tolerated within the city, right? Something I'm going to know. If I show up and there's hardly any goods and people appear to be starving and they're fighting over food at prices way beyond what they should, that's going to clue me into the economic situation in this city. Whereas the other way around, if I go there and everybody's well-dressed and wealthy and there's a lot of luxurious goods and not a lot of signs of homeless and hungry people running around, that let me know the city is in a very positive economic situation. And that type of thing. And of course, watching how often people get robbed and thieves. Something Kip would be paying very close attention to as the resident thief in the group. So they're going to the marketplace and going to the inn. The 2 best places also to get information and gossip. People like to talk when they're trying to be friendly and trying to get you to buy their stuff. It's a great time to ask questions. Oh, I really like this bowl that you have here. It's very nice. I might like to buy this bowl. What's the price? This and that. Oh, yeah. Well, this bowl came from so-and-so, a village way up to the north. You can't get bowls anywhere in the world except for up there. I learned a little bit about the geography of the area. Well, that's awfully nice and such, but I don't know if oh, yeah, it's a great. How long are you in the city? They get to talking about the city, learn information while haggling and making this sale. And artist knows this, the whole group does, so going to a marketplace is very high on their list as quickly as they can when entering into a city that has enough size to actually have a designated marketplace area. A lot of information there, but I want to share it. Okay. The people they spoke to were polite and friendly, though clearly very guarded. They could feel they were being watched by the crowds at all times, because again, they stand out. Though unseen by everyone but Artis, Quintius walked by her side, telling her what he saw and sensed. Neither he nor Maeve had picked up on any specific evil or threat, but they couldn't help but feel a sense of overall danger around them. It appeared the people around them felt it as well. There was a sense of dread everywhere everywhere they went, and Artis didn't like it at all. Something was wrong in Haven's Crest. That was for sure. Artis just knew this is why they'd been led there. These people needed their help. So Maeve has the ability to detect evil. It's not Mergeworlds is not a little bit different than the standard spell when you're a paladin, which it's on all the time. And if someone just happens to walk through your aura, wham, you know there's an evil person there. It has to be directed. You can use it when you want to, but you turn it on and off. It's not on at all times. For all intents and purposes, it has a cooldown for those of you who are video game players. So Maeve use that, and then Quintius, who his is on all the time, but not as potent as Maeve's, unless specifically sensing danger from the source of darkness. Remember, while they're clerics of Zorn, he is technically an artifact of Minara, goddess of light. And while Artis has been chosen by Minara to carry this, which seems odd when you think about it, why wasn't it given to a cleric of the light? It is still an artifact of the light, Quintius is. And so diametrically opposed to the god of darkness, something of that source, of true evil, he's going to pick up on very quickly. But different shades of evil, goddess of lies, right? Goddess of pestilence and disease, god of pestilence and disease, things like that, goddess of death, may not pick up on those quite as much because he was specifically designed and created to fight darkness. That's why Quintius is where and what he is. But there you haven't sensed anything crazy, although there's just that overall feeling, and I don't know if you ever had that yourself. I've had you go to a place and people are all nervous. You could tell that laugh was just a little bit too loud. It seemed a little bit too forced, things of that nature. They're picking up on some stuff. Kip casually came to stand by Artis as she looked over the goods of a stall. He began running his hands across the bolts of cloth as if testing their textures. "We're being followed," he said softly. Artis knew well enough to continue perusing without obviously reacting to his words. "The Templars?" she asked. It had been quite obvious. "Yes," Kip replied, "but another as well. He is good. I've only seen him a couple of times." "Perhaps it's someone just curious," she whispered. "I don't think so," he replied, obvious concern in his voice. "They are being too cautious and are too well trained. Also, they're doing their best not to be seen by the Templars either." Smiling, Artis bought a bolt of beautiful red silk from the merchant, who seemed very happy with the price she made, as well as being in awe of Artis. "I cannot sense this person Kip speaks of," says Quintius. Now remember, no one can see or hear Quintius except for Artis. So he could just be standing there talking full volume voice at her. She'll hear it, nobody else will. But that's what he says. He goes, "I don't sense whoever they're talking about. Either they have some kind of magic cloaking them, or they have nothing dangerous about them. So either they're very powerful and are able to hide themselves from my senses, or there's nothing about them that would trigger me, that would fall under my ability to sense." Doesn't mean they're not dangerous or even potentially evil, but they may not be within that scope of what his abilities can search for. Let's see. Here we go. "Vampire?" asked Artis to both Kip and Quintius, because if she kind of looks at him and goes, "Vampire?" they'll both hear it, right? "I sense no powerful undead force in the immediate area," said Quintius. Artis knew Quint's magic was powerful, but limited in range, which is true. It's very powerful, but it only goes a certain range from where the actual scepter is, which she has tucked in her belt 24/7. Under the pillow when she's it's always within reach of her. And so, but it limits where he can go. He can't just go running off across the city. He has to be within a certain range of the scepter, and different abilities of his have different ranges. So sensing has one ability. His ability to create holy light is much brighter and stronger, but has a much longer cooldown kind of thing. So he says, "No, I don't sense anything, any strong undead in the area," which is something he would more likely be able to pick up on, maybe not as well as Menandra. "No," answered Kip as well. "Unless they found a way to survive sunlight, he's not staying to the shadows, instead using the crowd to hide himself." He's talking about the man that's been following them. So he's not trying to hide in the shadows. He's walking around in the crowd, but he's using that crowd to stay hidden. So, then again, unless somehow he can survive sunlight, which only some born vampires like Draven and Seraph can do. "Inform the others," said Artis quietly. "Then look for an opportunity for you and Rand to break off from us. We'll see who this mystery man is more interested in following. Will give us a chance to see the Templars' reaction as well. So Artis is like, okay, make sure everybody else knows what you saw, casually. And then you and Rand bumble off. And if you still see the guy following you, we'll know you guys are a little bit more interesting to him. You don't see him anymore, it's more likely us, even though we're not picking up on him. Also, the Templars, hey, there's 6 of them. How are they going to handle us dividing up like that? Let's test 2 things at once here. Kip nodded and made his way around to their friends. Artis smiled as he spoke with Petal, seeming as if the two were discussing the freshness of the herbs on the booth before them. Kip's skills as a thief had become invaluable to them. His cool head during times of danger, his skills as a fighter, and his ferocious loyalty had earned him a place as a trusted friend and companion. Most importantly, though, to Artis, was how happy he made Rand. The young warrior no longer seemed like the silent shadow always on her heels. Kip had brought out the best in Rand, bringing the man finally out of his shell. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Rand and Kip began to move away from them, making their way down a side street of shops and craftsmen. Artis noticed that only 1 Templar split from the group to follow them. The other 5 continued to follow Artis, Petal, and Maeve from a short but obvious distance. So that tells them a lot, right? You're going to keep an eye on our 2 guards, but these 3, Maeve, which Maeve being Maeve, Minotaur, such, understandable, but Maeve, Artis, and Petal are the ones that the Templars are truly concerned with watching over. They didn't even split in half. It's like, well, go follow those guys and keep an eye on them while we do the serious business. It's kind of the feeling that they're getting from this. So, for the rest of the afternoon, they go throughout the different shops, going up and down a couple of the streets, the marketplace in general, buying certain goods, making a point of talking to many people. They do get the occasional question from folks, are you a real cleric? You still worship the old gods? But most people seem uncomfortable bringing up that topic. It's almost like some people are like they're about to, then decide it's better not to. But a few brave folks still do. But they spend the rest of the afternoon looking around, and as they are, nothing of major interest really happens. While talking with people around the city, they do get around the market area, they do learn a little bit more information about the town. They learn that the Children of the Night have been active for about 15 to 18 years in this area. That's how long they've really kind of been a controlling force. There may have been whispers and stuff of them before that, but really within the last 15 to 18 years is when they came to Providence. The temple was built, which is one of the newest, the only new large building in town. A bunch of old homes and stuff, we're told, mostly buildings that were not used anyways, if anything, from homeless. They tore a section of that out in order to build the new temple. Which was of great importance to the Lord of the Night, that it be something large and looming that would show the people the strength and power of his goddess, right? What all priests want to do is to show the power and authority of even Artis's temple in Serenity is freaking huge. It's massive. Probably it competes with, if it's not bigger than the one in Paxual, which is technically still way bigger than Serenity. Paxual's huge. The city. The land Paxual controls is not as much land as Serenity claims at this point. But the city itself, especially when you consider the whole dock area on the ocean and everything, is huge. Probably the biggest of their cities that they deal with the exception, of course, of the Dwarven city, Corman, which is deep underground. That they did that whole adventure where they helped get the kingdom back. The Elven kingdom of Santriel, which is thousands of years old, and the whole forest is massive and just dwarfs anyone else. Even the dwarfs, right? Obviously. And then the third one would be Oromon. Oromon has a huge amount of land. And the city is about the same size as Paxual, the central city. But the amount of land it controls rivals Santriel. Oromon is a huge plot of land. And up until this point, the largest chunk of a single world in one place caused by the merge, right? Right? The merge grabbed chunks of all these worlds and threw them together. But Oromon, this huge chunk of a world, ended up where it was. And no one's ever come across a piece of land or part of a world that's that big before. Santriel being the only other exception. Cool? All right. We'll continue. So They learned that about the 15 to 18 years. They also learned that very little happens politically. There's not a lot of political rivalries. That most people, when chosen to be on the Senate Council of 13 folks, those people are there until they're either dead or incapable of continuing their jobs, at which point their replacement would be chosen by the faction they represented, either some of the noble houses, one of the guilds, like a merchants guilds and such. Paxwall very much being the same kind of a setup. They also learned that there's very little trade outside the country. So there's some to the north, but most of the country itself is self-sufficient. Large amount of craftsmen, large amount of resources that they're able to self-sustain, so that trade is not needed very much outside at all. But they did learn that once a year, a large caravan does come from the north, that there's a large trade city there named Numeria that is several weeks' travel to the north, that once a year a large caravan will come down and bring a bunch of goods, and then there's a big like a fair and selling and trading, and they buy a bunch of stuff, so on and so forth. For those of you with a keen ear, microphone, those of you with a keen ear and keen memory might recognize Numeria as the trade city where Seraph and his group joined up with Red before heading east to try to cross over the mountain range, but much, much further to the north. And they were afraid to go south, closer to the water, which is where artists and them are, not right on the water's edge at this point, where they're at, but close, for fear that Oromon would have ships there. So where in the timeline this is, don't know, right? That's the thing. Is Seraph up there right now, or is he already gone, or is he not there yet? A lot of confusing stuff. I can let you know that at this point, he's already gone. He's no longer in Numeria. So that part is, they've already left. But artists and them have no reason in the world to say, oh, Numeria, let's go up there. They have no reason to lead them north. But to just kind of put a layout to give you an idea of where this group is compared to Seraph's group, this is the first time I've done that. So they are several weeks south. Both groups are heading east, but Seraph is ahead of them. So I want to catch you up on that. Let's see. So that's really the information that they pick up in the, other than just minuscule stuff with some of the guilds and stuff, but nothing of major importance other than those pieces of information. As the sun starts to go down, Kip and Rand will regroup, ends up joining back up with them, states that they never saw the mystery follower once. From the moment they split up, Kip got no sign of him at all. So either he's buggered off, or he was still following Artis and them, and Artis just wasn't able, and Maeve and Petal, they just didn't notice. Petal, of the three of them, probably the most likely to notice. Kender got a little bit of natural skills there as well. But even she did not pick up on any mystery follower. Only the 5 Templars, which are now 6 again. Once the group comes back together, so is that Templar. So they decide to head back to the inn with all their shopping loot. Okay, they'd spent a fair amount of coin in the market and up and down the streets. This was a situation where they kind of went opposite of what they normally do. They were trying to draw attention. They were letting money flow, not just throwing it away, obviously, but they were making purchases and doing so and not haggling hard for the prices, right? And they were doing this for a couple of reasons. One, they want to be seen as a positive source of power, right? This positive group coming to the city. We're not here to hurt people or mess with you. In fact, here's money for your economy. Hey, we're buying stuff. We're being a positive force of nature, if you will. So they did that, as well as make, be known. The word will get around. Hey, did the clerics buy something from your stall? They did. They bought this bowl that I didn't think I've had for 3 years that nobody would ever buy. Gave me such a pleasant person to talk to. Super friendly. Wasn't threatening to me at all. Hoping that good vibe goes out. Because if they're here to help these people, it's not going to work if these people view them as a threat or an enemy. So they were trying to have a positive effect on the people that they came into contact with in the city. So, hoping that word would spread for them. They return to the inn and they get themselves a fine meal. Again, it's a very luxurious place, much nicer than the normal inns they stay in. And so the clientele are a bit wealthier as well. Okay. Now, Kip notices through the window while they're eating that another group of 6 Templars shows up, and the original group leaves. He sees this changing of the guard, which kind of lets them know, okay, well, those guys are going to probably sit out there all night long. You know what I mean? They're not just going to leave and come back and see us tomorrow. They've been the changing of the guard. So we got to be aware that those guys are out there still waiting for us. They do open up and have talk with some of the people that sit near them. One of the barmaids was very curious about them, asking questions, which of course got some of the people around them listening, obviously listening in, but trying not to be obviously listening. You know, trying to be subtle, sneaky, but not pulling it off. Which of them, a couple of them got pulled in questions. And Artis and them and Maeve were always very polite. Maeve very much let Artis do a lot of the talking. This is Artis's strength. You know, I only speak the truth. I am the voice of my god. You know, Maeve is the fist of her god. She knows her role. And she also knows she can be very imposing. So kind of sitting in the back, more against the wall, where she's away from more people, not seeming as threatening, lets Artis kind of shine and bring that positive light that she just so much gives out when she talks to people. Very charismatic, Artis is. So they have themselves a nice meal, chat with some folks, decide to turn in a bit early. It's still early evening, but they decide to go back up to the room and get a good night's rest. Because they did travel a bunch to get here and then walked around all day. Get a good night's sleep, and then tomorrow we can go back out there and see what else we can learn. Plus, tomorrow they intend on going to the temple. They're going to go as a group, keeping themselves together, because they don't know exactly what's going to be in there, if it's a threat to them or not. But it will seem rude if they wait too long, and they're not here trying to make enemies. Even though they have their concerns about these children of the night, positive friendliness might get them way more information, at least in the short term. So they plan on doing that. They go ahead and they go upstairs to go back to their rooms. Now, Rain and Kip go to their rooms. They're going to get some rest. Maeve decides to go into Artis and Petal's room. Again, it's still relatively early in the evening, and they're going to talk a little bit about their plans for the next day and what they want to do. Very often, Kip and Rand let them do that planning, and then Kip and Rand just kind of stay behind unless they, follow them with those things. They let them do a lot of the planning, unless it involves sneaky time, and then they bring Rand and Kip in. They're like, okay, what's our best way to sneak in here? And then Rand, Kip, and Petal kind of work that stuff out. But when it comes to the talking and making plans, that they like to let the clerics kind of lead that fun. Artis is the de facto leader of this group. So Rand and Kip return to their room, surprised by the butterflies they'd forgotten. They'd completely forgotten about them. They walk in the door, butterflies everywhere. And they're like, oh, right, we forgot about that. They open up the windows, some of the butterflies flitter out. Some are just still hanging out, and they're trying to shoo them out without hurting them. Very pretty butterflies. They get a big smile out of it. Maeve went with Petal and Artis to their room, planning on talking a bit before heading to sleep. Rand and Kip were only alone for a moment before Kip surprised him. I need to go back out for a bit, he said very seriously. Whatever for? Asked Rand, surprised. There was someone in the lounge, a man, not the one that was following us before, someone new. He made it known to me that he was part of the local thieves guild, and he wanted to speak to me alone. Rand was shocked. But I did not see you speak with anyone, he said. Kip smiled and put his hand on Rand's shoulder. Thieves have a way of communicating that does not need words. It is universal, and I know it well. And this would be considered thieves' cant. Thieves' cant is a mixture of course, words of its own language and a lot of hand signs. And so it's signs and symbols and hand movements that thieves would understand. It's very tightly guarded. Not everybody just knows this or learns all of it. But it's something Kip is very familiar with. Remember, Kip's a half-elf. He's over 100 years old. He's been in the thieves' life a very long time. He's traveled a lot, and he's learned there's a lot of commonality between how thieves speak. Rand embraced him. You are no thief. You're a good man. That is not your life anymore. Kip kissed him, and his smile slightly faded. I fear that life will always be a part of me. Still, it can be useful to us. No one has more information about an area than its guild, than its thieves guild. I may learn more in a couple minutes than we could on our own in weeks. I shall not be gone long. I'll buy a drink, have a few words, and be back before you know it. The two men separated, and Kip opened the door. With a wink and a smile, he was gone, leaving Ran alone to worry. And it's true, a thieves' guild has more knowledge than pretty much anybody, unless that city is smart enough to have its own spy faction. And even then, it'd still be hard to keep up with it. So if Kip can get even a little information from this guy down in the bar, get himself a drink, like, I'm going to go down to the bar. I'm going to hang out around a lot of people, maybe have a chat with this guy. I'm not the one that stands out from our group, right? I'm just a dude wearing my regular clothes. I'm not wearing a big floppy hat right now. I'm going to go down and just be casual, get a drink, maybe chat with this guy, learn us some stuff. The three young women had been chatting for a while, discussing their plans for the next day and how they would deal with the temple. Neither Artis or Maeve had felt any sense of holy power from the priests they'd met. We talked about that earlier. While that was not a guarantee, it did make them a bit more confident that the church did not have the blessings or power of a true God. So they believe that the Children of the Night is a fake religion. That's what they're here to find out for sure. And everything they've seen so far is leaning more towards them believing that. Although, as we've discussed, you don't always know for sure. Not that it meant that they had no power. By that I mean the Children of the Night. They would have to have powers of some sort to convince an entire nation they represented a true deity. Or deity, how do you want to say that? What the source of that power was, well, that was another of their biggest concerns. So these guys had to show power of some kind. Could it be mages? Could it be the vampires? Who knows? Magic items or artifacts? How is it that this religion has grown this huge without showing that they have the powers and blessings and skills of a god of some kind, right? So there's something behind this. We got to figure out what that is. Suddenly, about that time, there came a soft knocking at the door. It was not very late yet, but they knew it wasn't Ran or Kip. The group had a special knock to identify themselves. It's not shave and a haircut, but they have a specific knock they would use so they know it's one of their group that's actually knocking at the door. "Who is it?" asked Maeve, standing just inside the door. A man's voice could be heard from outside. "I've been sent to deliver a gift from the innkeeper, a bottle of his best wine for his guests." Petal and Artis armed themselves, and Maeve's hand rested on the grip of her immense sword, and she slowly opened the door. Standing there was a man of standard height. He wore plain gray robes, and Maeve could see they were old and covered in dust. The man's robes were pulled up over his head, his face lost in the shadows. In his hands he held a generic bottle that could have wine inside, though the glass was dark and it was hard to see. Maeve knew that this was wrong. There was no way this man, dressed as he was, worked at this fine establishment. And if that was a lie, then that meant this man was danger. With one swift movement, Maeve's hand lashed out, grabbing him around the throat. She lifted him off the floor. He felt lighter than he looked, and then slammed him against the wall inside of their room. His feet dangled over a foot from the floor. So literally one hand reached out. She's got huge hands, man. They're massive. For a skinny person, she could wrap her hand almost around your neck and almost touch fingers. She just reaches up, grabs this person, pulls him into the room, and then slams him up against the wall, feet not touching the ground. Of course, you can imagine the glass bottle falls to the floor and breaks. His hood had fallen back, revealing a man in his 40s, human, with graying thin hair. The man grabbed at Maeve's hand, trying to pull her away, but his thin arms were no match for her strong grip, which she tightened even more. "Who are you?" commanded Artis. The man's eyes flickered between the three women. "Sure," he struggled to say, his face turning blue from lack of air. "Maeve," said Artis, hinting, hey, let's calm up a little bit. Maeve loosened her grip only a bit, just as Ran rushed in, dressed only in pants and his sword. He heard the calamity across the hall. He was probably already laying in bed, grabs his sword and comes running out. He's just in pants, bare feet. May even cut his foot on that glass. He'll have to talk to Artis about that. Now that he had a little bit more, the man gasped. Undershirt. The man pawed at his robes, struggling to open them. Yeah, here we go. Maeve knocked away his hands with her free hand. Right? She had two hands. Gripping his robes tightly, she tore them open. What she saw there made her eyes go wide, and the other women gasped. Maeve slowly lowered the man to the floor. Not far away, in a dark alley near the inn, Kip stood in the shadows. "What in the name of the gods were you thinking?" came the cool female voice from the glass orb Kip held in his hand. "Vampires are creatures beyond their capabilities. How could you let them go there?" The woman's voice was calm yet sharp. There was nothing in this world that frightened Kip more. "They would not be deterred, my lady," Kip whispered back. "The artifact led them here, and artists trust it completely." There was a moment before the Black Rose spoke again. "This changes things," she said finally, "and I find it a bit too coincidental that your search for Seraph would lead you to his undead cousins. I will give you a list of things you will need to procure that will help guard you from them. Find out everything you can about these children of the night. A city ruled by vampires is not a situation we can let stand. It will take far too long for any help I can send to get you there." So the Black Rose is like, "You're chasing after Seraph, who has blood in his veins, born vampire, partially, part-type person. And you're chasing him, and you happen to come across a country that might have a bunch of vampires in it, or maybe in league with the religion that is running this." Black Rose is not happy to hear that at all. You think about that because she knows about her other personality. A city full of ruled by the undead? Dandy and Michael are not going to stand for that. And while Rose is not directly a hunter, being a part of Dandy, she still shares that hatred and abhorrence of that, right? Because she hates, part of her coming into creation was Draven's brother, right? It was part of what caused Rose to finally become who she was. So she knows everything. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Everything Dandy knows, right? She knows everything Dandy knows. So she knows all of the tricks and stuff for being a hunter, has those skills as well. She says, "I'm going to give you a list of stuff you need to gather that's going to help protect you against them." And while Petal may know some of this stuff as well, here's some things she might not. Kip nodded, then memorized the list as she gave it to him, reading it back until she was confident that he had memorized it all. "Remember why you are there," said the Black Rose. "If you should fail me in this, I will give you a fate worse than death, even if I have to bring you back to the land of the living myself." The globe ceased glowing, and Kip knew he was alone. With trembling fingers, he placed it gently in its bag. So the Rose is like, if you fail me, you're there for one reason. Don't forget that. If you fail at this, I'm going to give you the worst existence possible, even if I have to bring you back from the dead to do it. And that is not an idle threat from someone like her, because she probably can get it done. Death is not an escape. You know, failing her and killing yourself is not going to work, because if you fail her bad enough, she'll just have you brought back. That's a whole new facet we've never dealt with the Rose. First time anything like that. And Kip truly believes this threat. Not that he knows for sure it's ever happened, but he wholeheartedly believes this. So he's relayed that information to her. She is unhappy that he let them go there. In other words, his part of whatever he's there to do was to keep him away from situations like this, but he was unable to because Quintius's counsel was just too strong. Artis has complete faith in Quintius at this point. So he's kind of stuck helping them the way it's supposed to, but now he's also got this other command. You need to get as much information about these children tonight and get it to me, because I need to know more about this as well. But no matter what that is, even though I'm giving you that command, you know the main reason you're there. Do not fail me on this. Stark reminder of exactly how dangerous the Rose can be. But that is where we're going to call it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Merged Worlds, episode 106. I also would love to hear your feedback on what you thought of this now it being pre-recorded. If you have any thoughts about that, please share that again down in the comments section of this video, or reach out to me on my website, Onlydraven.com. bottom of the homepage is a place you can email me. While you're there, go check out the characters tab. I use Hero Forge, which is an amazing website to design minis for a lot of the different characters in the gods and the heroes and people you see in Mergeworlds. You can swing there and click on the characters tab and see minis to get a kind of a visual representation of what a lot of these characters look like, if you're ever curious about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But we'll be back here again in 2 more weeks for another episode of Mergeworlds. We were just on a brief hiatus while I kind of worked out how this pre-recorded stuff was going to work. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. If you like it better, if you don't like it, if it really didn't make a difference, let me know. While you're there, though, it would be awesome if you click the like button. Be sure to share this and subscribe with friends you may have who might enjoy Dungeons & Dragons or a good story. And if you have an account on any of the audio podcast apps, it'd be awesome if you'd consider giving us a follow and a 5 stars and a likes and a ratings and whatever it is over there. Review. I can't even remember what it is on all of them. But it'd be awesome if you'd continue supporting the channel and this story. It means a lot to me. But that is going to do me for today. Thank you so very much for joining me again for an episode of Mergeworld. I look very, very forward to sharing more story with you in the near future. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.